just being able to see them start in one look, shift, bring somebody down, pull somebody off, like stuff like that is going to obviously affect the protection, whether it's run protection, whether it's pass protection. And so especially when they do it late, if you don't have an offensive line who has a lot of chemistry, it can create some leakage and dudes can get in the backfield, create some tackle for losses.
Putting in work. Yeah. Putting in work. I thank God for the favor when the money come. Half for the time, tax fees, and sufficient funds. What I gotta do to get ahead, I'm on to something. What I gotta do to get a raise, they owe me one. Putting in work. All I ever wanted was a choice. Rolls Royce.
At the Modest Sports Show, we believe in teamwork, and not just on the field. That's why we're proud to partner with Lift Up the Vulnerable, an incredible organization protecting the world's most at-risk children in war-torn regions. Through your support, Lift Up the Vulnerable prevents human trafficking, offers life-saving education, and provides hope to vulnerable communities. Over 86% of every dollar they receive goes directly into their transformative work in Sudan and South Sudan. Make a difference today by becoming a monthly sponsor. Whether it's $10 or $500 a month, every dollar matters. And don't forget, follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media to see how your support is changing lives in real time. To learn more about the incredible work they're doing, contact Alex Hill at 205-515-6696 or visit liftupthevulnerable.org. Follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media and join the movement. Together, let's lift those up who need it most. Welcome to the Modest Sports Show, home of your college athlete, where we are player-led and player-focused. Guys, today is a lovely day. Today is a lovely day as I look out and see the beautiful terrain of this Alabama winter. Today is such a lovely day. So today we're going to talk about some football like we always do on this show. And today's date is December 18th, just a few days before the college football first round playoffs. And so we're going to look at some picks and previews. We're also going to take a look at some scenarios, situations. And like I said, I'm going to make my picks in these games. So I'm looking forward to kind of unraveling this tumultuous journey that we're going to go on in college football. But like last week, if you haven't, I covered Clemson versus Texas. And so today I'm going to be covering the last three, or the next three games. The first game being Indiana versus Notre Dame. This game is Friday, December 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC and ESPN. The second game is Saturday, December 21st. That's SMU versus number 11 SMU at number 6 Penn State. That's 12 p.m. on TNT and Max. And then lastly, Saturday, December 21st, later on that evening, number 9 Tennessee at number 8 Ohio State. That game is at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC and ESPN as well. So we're going to take a look at this Indiana versus Notre Dame game, and that's what we're going to start with. So looking at this game, this matchup, I said, has the feel of a rivalry game. Though it's not a traditional one, my initial thought is Notre Dame is going to out-physical Indiana. I felt like they had a chance to potentially run away with the game. However, this Indiana team does have an opportunity to create some knockback in the trenches, specifically on Notre Dame's defensive front, because they are particularly light. The average size of a Notre Dame, of this Notre Dame defensive front, is about 6'4", 260 pounds. Now, they're small, but depending on how aggressive they play in this Indiana matchup, it could be, and just like all football games, it's going to be one in the trenches. But because Notre Dame is a little undersized at the defensive front, I am curious to see. So each team, and I think I'll kind of get to this later on Indiana's offensive line, each side has some glaring weaknesses. And so with this Notre Dame team, with this Notre Dame defensive line, their weakness is they're a little undersized. Indiana, however, on the offensive side of the ball, they got big guys and they have guys who can fire off the ball. Sustaining blocks is not a strength of theirs. So, kind of that's where this position is going to be won. That's where these trenches are going to be won. This battle is going to be won in the trenches, depending on which side can kind of suppress their weaknesses for the duration of that game. Now, like I said, Indiana's offensive line, they concern me. If we look back at the Ohio State game, right, Indiana, and the reason I'm referencing Ohio State for Indiana gave up 5 sacks in that game. And Ohio State did a good job showing some simulated pressures and the things that they did in their blitz packages. I feel strongly that Notre Dame will take a look at that film and try to implement some of the things Ohio State used to kind of give them an advantage. Aside from this, Notre Dame runs a NFL-style scheme, at least in my opinion. And the reason I say this is because they play a lot of man. They rely heavily on their man defense to do different things, bring pressures, add guys to the box. Like, I genuinely believe when you look at Notre Dame's defense, and I said this earlier in the season, just kind of looking at how they played against Texas A&M and seeing the size and the speed of guys at the second and third level, it looks like a quarters defense. The linebackers look like safeties. And so this can be a plus, this can be a minus, depending on the personnel of their opponent and how well their opponent can run the ball. Leading me to my next point. Indiana is going to have a balanced approach against Notre Dame. And they typically do. However, I feel like they're going to have to rely heavily on production in their run game. Reason being, Notre Dame is only giving up 157 yards per game in the air. And so, offensively, Indiana averages about 265 yards in the air per game. So, with that being said, the lost production that they see in the pass game, they're going to have that in the run game. Now, like I just mentioned, Notre Dame, they are kind of, I won't even say undersized at linebacker, but they don't have the traditional style linebacker. Like I was watching the film guy yesterday, their linebackers look more like converted safeties. And so with that being said, Indiana could benefit from this in the run game, just depending on how they approach it. And so just speaking more about Notre Dame's corners, because I really love that defense, because I was an undersized linebacker. I feel like with the right training, I would have been able to play safety. I did play nickel early in my college career, but aside from this, so I always like to see guys who are like right there in between those hybrid backers who can showcase some versatility. Especially guys my size, dudes who you look at, okay, well, he has the height of an edge, but he's not as big as an edge. So, like, for instance, I love to see dudes like Kyle Hamilton play football, playing a post safety, able to play a free safety, able to just do different things and move around the field. I love to see that. At times, if you need it, put him at Sam or Jack backer, just depending on your scheme. So I love to see stuff like that. So this Notre Dame defense to me is exciting to watch. Their corners are fast, physical, confident, and they're smart. Their corners are smart. And because they're smart and fast, they're able to rely a lot on those instincts and abilities. For instance, I've seen in a cover 3, they're in a cover 3 zone, the corners will come down and play at man depth. And so to a quarterback pre-snap, they're looking at this, okay, is this a cover 1 high safety, or is this are we in a cover 3, like what's going on? So I love to see that from their corners and them kind of own the secondary. Now, for Indiana, handling Notre Dame's pressure is going to be critical. So because Notre Dame can play a lot of man, and they free up other guys to be able to insert them in some pressures and some blitz packages. The way Ohio State brought blitzes exposed Indiana's struggles in maintaining blocks. And if Indiana doesn't prove they can pass the ball against man to kind of, get the secondary thinking, right? Get those extra pieces that Notre Dame wants to add in run support or in those blitz packages, have them second guessing. Maybe do some things with back outs and stuff like that, just to get those guys kind of peeling and kind of alleviate some of the pressure on the quarterback. So I do feel like Indiana is it's kind of a tale of two stories with this Indiana football team and the way they go about playing Notre Dame. If you run the ball, if you're too run dominant, you kind of leave the run game susceptible to dudes who are going to be able to kind of fill the box and create short yardage situations on the offensive perspective. If you throw the ball too much, then you leave yourself susceptible for dudes kind of leaking through those cracks and getting to the quarterback. So this I really feel like this Indiana Notre Dame game is going to be a chess match, and I'm really looking forward to that. And so, mentioning some stats, total defense for Notre Dame ranks 9th at 296.8 yards per game. Passing yards allowed, we already discussed that, but they rank 3rd in the nation at 157.9 yards per game. Total offense for Indiana, they rank 25th at 438.8 yards per game. Rushing offense, 51st. 173.6 yards per game. Passing offense, 29th, 265.2 yards per game. So as you can see, this Indiana team, they're balanced in a sense. I would say, about 70%, we'll say 60-65% pass, 35% run. So just be aware of a chess match in this Indiana Notre Dame game. But my pick is going to be Notre Dame. I do feel like Notre Dame's defense is going to give Indiana a hard run, or a run for their money. I think they're going to lead this game victorious and proceed to the second round. Next up on our agenda is SMU versus Penn State. Now, I said this game is fascinating because of the contrasting styles. SMU brings a finesse ACC flavor, while Penn State, coming out of the Big Ten, thrives on a more run-dominant, smash-mouth brand of football. And so, at the time of kickoff in this game, now this is 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Time of kickoff is going to be 26 degrees. Now, I did say that, and even Cam Newton on his last podcast, he made mention of, when you get warm, playing in conditions like that, when that body heat rises, you're not worried about it until you go onto the sideline to sit down. That's kind of a paraphrase of what he said. For me, however, I just was never effective in cold weather. And I'm sad to say that coming from a defensive guy, but it is mind over matter. But I won't say. Let me take that back. I won't say I was ineffective. I'll say certain hits and angles and stuff, you kind of thought twice about how to go about getting dudes to the ground. That's what I say. And so I feel like in these conditions, right, if SMU doesn't bring the right mind to the game, I feel like Penn State is going to be able to lean on SMU with their two-headed beast in Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, and which they're used to these conditions, and just be able to wear on this SMU football team. So SMU is going to have to bring the right mind to the game. Now, aside from this, SMU offense does have tools to create a lot of problems for Penn State defensively. They cannot afford another slow start, though, like they had in the Clemson game, because it's going to be much colder in Happy Valley, and so than it was in Charlotte for the ACC championship. So they really have to bring their right mind to this game. Penn State is simply a better football team than Clemson to me. So that's kind of like, another reason why SMU is not going to be able to coming to that game half-stepping. They're going to have to bring their A-game in that game. SMU likes to go up-tempo. They run multiple looks out of pistol Y-off formation. These are some things that I know that now we're talking like real football. We're getting into that. I seen some boot actions, some stretch zones, as well as some wide zones, and some offset back sets as well. All right. Now, I feel like these pistol formations, whether it was out of 11 or 12 personnel, because of the brand of football players SMU has, I think it's methodical to kind of get their playmakers in space, but also make SM or Penn State's or whoever they're playing actually to make their opponent be patient and kind of like give the offense the advantage, right? So if you're running stretch zones or wide zones, right, we're coming at this angle, and obviously if any type zone you're looking for a cutback, but I feel like with these stretch zones or with these wide zones, it spaces things out, and it makes the running back, or if it's end around, whatever the run style is, it makes the defense kind of say, you got to be firm in your gap and maintaining leverage, but at the same time, you're trying to prevent a cutback. And when we wash everything down with these wide zones, especially coming out of pistol, our running back has a head of steam, and we're washing everything with these wide zones. It makes it hard on the defense. And Penn State specifically struggled with this when they played Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Oregon, they lined up in the pistol, and they ran some wide zones, some stretch zones to the boundary, to the field. So it's going to put a lot of stress on the Penn State defense, or any defense for that matter. But SMU is going to have to establish that run game to be taken serious, or for that Penn State defense to actually get them moving laterally. Maybe that was a weakness, and now that I'm thinking about it, that was a weakness of that Penn State defense going against Oregon, those lateral runs. So really key that, and I think this is going to be something SMU uses, and they do it traditionally anyways, because like I said, they did it a lot in the Clemson game. However, it might be something you see a little bit more of against Penn State because of Penn State's inability to stop it effectively. So just key that. Now defensively, right, I said SMU stood tall against Clemson, giving up very little ground on some of those quarterback draws and run plays. What stood out to me was their late shifts in the snap count. This could cause stress on Penn State's offensive line communication, and that's something to key on. So there's a few teams in college football, in my opinion, who do these late shifts and these late bumps on the defensive side of the ball that kind of affect the offensive timing as well as the snap count. So, for instance, when I was watching some film on SMU versus Clemson, SMU they would be in a 4-man, 3-man front, or mainly a 4-man front, do some late shifts, and they'll bring that Sam backer down and hug him to the line of scrimmage. So he'll go from being a stack to being on the line. So for me, that was something that I said, okay, obviously each team, like we just talked about with Notre Dame, they do stuff like this in their secondary. Confuse the quarterback, give him different looks. Some teams do it on both levels, like Georgia, with the defensive line as well as in the secondary. SMU, I saw more of this on the defensive line, on the interior. And so just being able to see them start in one look, shift, bring somebody down, pull somebody off, like stuff like that is going to obviously affect the protection, whether it's run protection, whether it's pass protection. And so especially when they do it late, if you don't have an offensive line who has a lot of chemistry, it can create some leakage, and dudes can get in the backfield, create some tackle for losses. So that's something to watch for in this SMU versus Penn State game also. Now, another thing I made note of, because I'm an SEC guy, Penn State and SMU's and Indiana's and Notre Dame's, I didn't spend a lot of time watching them this season. And then also the strength of schedule, it wasn't really much to watch. For teams like Notre Dame, Indiana, maybe SMU, but they had a couple games that were watchable. Clemson, these guys, for a great part of the season, didn't really play anybody. And that's no knock to the actual teams they play, only to the strength of schedule, right? Only to their conference as a collective. So I'm not blaming them. But, when you have more important games going on over the course of a season, of course you would rather see those than, see the other ones. So aside from that, I say this to say Penn State was not a team I watched, and Drew Aller was a name that I'd heard a lot, and of course I know who he is, but I didn't really pay attention to his style of play in his game. No, he was a pro-style quarterback, and the times I have seen him, he was underwhelming in games against Michigan, in games against Ohio State. And then, like I mentioned, if you're playing Purdue and you're playing who else? If we're playing these other games, these other teams, I'm not really focused, or that doesn't excite me. That doesn't impress me. I'm sorry. And like I said, me being an SEC guy, maybe that's a biased take, but I'm just not really sold on, something like give me a team like Penn State versus Wisconsin. Like I'm not sold, man. So I'm sorry, label me a hater or whatever. But in this game against Oregon, I saw Drew Aller step up to that level of competition, and I said, well, if you would play like this against Penn State or Ohio State back in November, Penn State would be in a completely different situation. They would have a first round bye more than likely, because they would have had momentum leading into the championship game against Oregon. So I don't know. I just think it changes those kind of wins, changes the morale of teams. And so aside from this, Drew Aller, he made some throws in that game against Oregon that I was thoroughly impressed with, and I just was like, okay, what they say on X, or formerly Twitter, I wasn't familiar with your game. And so Drew Aller, he stepped up to that level of competition. Is he going to be able to do that consistently throughout this run in the playoffs is the bigger question. And like we mentioned before, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, they are a two-headed beast in the backfield. I think they kind of remind me of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, or give me another two-headed duo in football right now. I guess we could say when healthy, what's my name? Oh, Jordan James and Noah Whittington at Oregon. Like, there are some dudes, there are some duos in football right now that when you think of the cream of the crop, I think of Allen and Singleton. So, and then lastly, in this Oregon and Penn State game, before we get into some of the stats, I do feel like Penn State showed a lot of resilience in that win again, or in that loss to Oregon, right? At one point in the game, in the first quarter, they were down 14-3 in the first quarter. And so the way that they battled back and gave themselves a chance to win the game, I thought that was very, very worthy of them to, come back and fight. And so definitely interested to see them against SMU. Here are some stats for you. SMU ranks 103rd in the time of possession at 28 minutes per game. Now, this is you should particularly note this. Reason being, Big Ten style of play. Like we seen, like Michigan did this to Ohio State. They killed the clock. They made the most of the drives they got, whether it was getting into the red zone, whether it would and even in mind you, right, if your defense is playing well enough, even trips to the red zone it's a win, because even though you're not scoring away with, or you're walking away with points, you're killing clock. And so Penn State, they're gonna have the, just going based on the stats, they're gonna have the ability to kind of choke away some of the clock, especially the way they play. So aside from this, Penn State ranks 9th in rushing defense. They only give up 136 yards per game, and SMU runs the ball at 176.1 yards per game. And so they rank 49th in that category. Now, aside from this, SMU's red zone offense rates at 44th in the nation, scoring at about 88% every time they get into the red zone. And Penn State's defense is holding guys at 80%. So they rank 40th in the nation. So this game, another chess match, and I think that's what we're going to see across all the college football as we, gear towards the championship game. It's going to be more chess matches because you wouldn't have made it this far if you didn't have a methodical approach in the way you play football. So this game, Penn State is my pick in this game. I do feel like SMU, if they, like I said at the beginning of this, if they bring the right mind to it, I think they'll have a chance. But if they go up there and they let the conditions sway how they approach this game, Penn State, I feel like is gonna put the, I'm not gonna say blow them out, but they're gonna win. They're gonna whoop them in the trenches. They're gonna whoop them in all the areas like that you don't want to get whooped in when you're already playing in 26-degree weather. So be on the lookout for that. But Penn State is my pick in this game against SMU. Now, lastly, we have Tennessee versus Ohio State. Now, this is going to be a fun one for me, and I'm sure what the ESPN analytics might read is going to be very different than what my prediction is in this game. Okay, so Tennessee's offense, they thrive on unconventional spacing. I think we all know that, how Heupel runs his offense very wide. They stretch your defense very thin, kind of get you. They use all 53.5 yards to operate. And so this, like I said, will put a lot of stress on Ohio State's, specifically their box defenders, those front 7 dudes, right, or the front 9 dudes, or we could say front 8, especially the depth at which Caleb Downs likes to play at. He really plays as a kind of like a rover safety, box nickel, so many names for whatever you want to call it. Even though he is a traditional high safety, but he can roll down and he'll play at linebacker's depth. And even if he doesn't start off at linebacker's depth, he gets there quickly. And so that's something to be on the lookout for, because it's going to put a lot of stress on those guys on Ohio State's defense. So when I said when it comes to stopping the run, it's going to put that stress on them. Now, Tennessee, they don't just rely on their backs to pound the ball. Their run game is diverse and dynamic, and that's where I feel like they could separate themselves from Ohio State. So we saw during rivalry week, end of November, we saw Michigan was dominant in their run game, but they weren't varied. They didn't have varied schemes. They gave you different looks, but for the most part, it was inside zone. They were running inside zone. Credit to them, because if you're getting 5-6 yards a pop, why stop? And so, however, I feel Tennessee, because of Dylan Sampson, who I feel like doesn't get the recognition that he is worthy of, and not to say he's slept on, but I do feel like he's a premier running back in college football. Like, he gets north and south. And so I said, to me, he's quietly one of the best running backs in college football. Definitely has great vision, a burst, and versatile. I feel like Tennessee is going to have a better opportunity to run the football than even Michigan did on this Ohio State defense. And then when you add in Nico under the center at Tennessee, being our dual threat quarterback, I think they'll be able to lean on him some in the run game as well. Now, granted, this game is at Ohio State, but I don't feel like Tennessee, if they don't allow if Tennessee doesn't allow the awe of the moment to get to them, and they just go in and play the football that they've been playing over the course of this whole season, I do feel like they're going to give Ohio State a run for its money. So, aside from this, Ohio State's defense, particularly their defensive line, I think they'll find some success if they can exploit Tennessee's offensive line struggles, right? So, what I mean when I say this, Vanderbilt showed when they played Tennessee on rivalry week. Vandy showed that they could shift they went to a 3-man front, and I don't feel like Tennessee did a well enough job displacing those dudes, right? You got 5-on-3. Particularly in run protection, right? Now, in pass protection, I think that's any offensive line in the world is going to be able to win that battle. However, in those run schemes, I would have liked to see Tennessee's offensive line kind of get those guys moving up to that second level. And so I feel like with Ohio State having a 4-man front, or they sometimes go to a bear-like front, 5 guys. I feel like Ohio State is going to be able to kind of create a wall for Tennessee. And so that game is going to be another game where the trenches are going to mean a lot, and you're going to have to, and we're going to see who kind of gets the best of who can move dudes and who can create some knockback like we mentioned in this Indiana and Notre Dame game. Now, aside from this, offensively, and this is where I feel like things get murky for Ohio State. Offensively, I do not feel like Ohio State has what it takes to compete with Tennessee. And that's not by means of like weaponization. They got the weapons. That's utilization and scheme. How are they going to use the guys that they have? I feel like all season, right? Like honestly, there isn't a team aside from Oregon that I feel like Ohio State should have struggled with in scoring the football. You seen it with Nebraska. You seen some of it in Penn State. And we seen it with Michigan. Ohio State has too many weapons to not be able to move the football the way that they do. Now that makes me pose the question, right? And I thought about this over the course of the season. Is Will Howard the guy, or was their best option in the portal? Because when you look at it, right, at the time, like there were quarterbacks floating around last year who I think would have better fit what Ohio State has offensively. You had Cam Ward in the portal. You had Dylan Gabriel. Who are some other guys that maybe stuck out at the time? I feel like those are two of the highest names. Brain fog right now. But either way, Will Howard, not to say that he isn't a good quarterback, but I feel like he has kind of slowed the offense down at times, and not because of his ability, only because of decision making. And so I feel like this is going to continue and roll over into this Tennessee game. Ohio State is going to struggle offensively. Tennessee is they'll probably struggle early, but not often. They're going to find some rhythm. They're going to get to scoring the football in what Ohio State calls it the shoe, and Tennessee is going to win this game. I feel like Tennessee is going to beat Ohio State. I think this is a brand elevator for Tennessee as well because, and I mentioned this on my lives. If you aren't watching the lives, be sure to go check out our lives. We stream every Monday about 7:15 whenever the Monday night football game comes on. We stream that while I watch whoever's playing that night. Not really a big NFL guy, but just for the sake of the showing, continuing to add value to what we're doing, I go live, and I have my beautiful guests like you who I hope will join the live on this upcoming Monday. I believe that'll be December the 19th, 20th, 21st, December the 22nd, a few days before Christmas. I hope to see you there. But like I mentioned on my lives, Ohio State Tennessee will be able to elevate their brand. I'm sorry, I got lost right there. Tennessee will be able to elevate their brand just by beating Ohio State in a playoff game at their house. So Tennessee, they got all the ability in the world, I think, to make this happen. I feel like ESPN analytics are probably like saying, I haven't looked, but I feel like it would be somewhere in the 60% Ohio State to Tennessee's 30-something% to win the game. So, hey, man, I'm taking Tennessee. Tennessee is going to go up there and get it done. They're going to show out for the SEC, and y'all are going to see just why the SEC rules. Just why the SEC rules, man. And lastly, some stats for this Ohio State and Tennessee game. Tennessee ranks 9th in the nation in the rushing at 232 yards per game to Ohio State's only giving up 96.8 yards per game. And Tennessee ranks 14th in the nation in their third down conversion percentage. I feel like this is big. Obviously, with Tennessee being on the road, they're going to have to stay ahead of the sticks, which they do at 48.1% to Ohio State's 27th on third down stop percentage at 33.7%. All right, guys, that's all today. I'm glad that you joined me. If you haven't, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and just join our community, this Modest Sports Show community. We appreciate you. We had to change up the scenery today, kind of get out the office and give you a different look and feel. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check all of our other content. We are about to head into the off season, the off season for college football. But for us and what this show means to me, we're about to head in season. So we're gonna get with the guys who you see making the plays every Saturday, every Friday night, whatever, ACC, SEC. We're getting ready to get those guys back on the show. And I can't wait. I'm ready to get back out on the road and get in these facilities and see what these guys are up to and how they're approaching their off season. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. And in the meantime, catch all our other content. And you can find us everywhere: Instagram, X, YouTube, TikTok. Go catch up with all our shorts, our reels. Those are short forms of these videos, and to kind of keep you guys in the loop, keep it quick, and keep you engaged. Aside from that, you all have a great rest of your week. Be sure to watch these games, and we'll be back next week with the game reviews and kind of what's going on in the second round and what's that going to look like. I can't wait, man. I'm ready for these games. But you all have a great rest of your week, and until next time, peace.